He is a brilliant psychologist, cultured and witty. He loves classical music and appreciates fine wine. He also eats people. Nobody's perfect. It seems no matter how far humankind progresses, there is always a part that remains behind, a savage part, a killer longing to unleash hell. And the more sophisticated and complex society becomes, the more fascinated we are by those who embrace that savagery.
Friendly neighborhood psychos are fascinating to audiences. They repel us, but they fascinate us at the same time.
Psychopathic killer really appears in Hollywood film probably for the first time in the post-World War II period, undoubtedly influenced by the popularization, I think, of Freudian psychology in that era that indicated that we all have very dark sides to our person, that there are repressed desires within us that would scare us if they ever came out.
On March 18, 1932, Harry Powers, West Virginia's most notorious psychopathic killer, was hanged for the murder of a widow and her 3 children. Called the Bluebeard of Quiet Dell, he served as inspiration for Hollywood's first great psycho villain in 1955's Night of the Hunter. Reverend Harry Powell, played by Robert Mitchum, is a Bible-quoting man of God who sidelines as a cold-blooded killer.
And to hide this evil in a person who's a preacher, that also makes it rather unnerving. He's perfectly happy to cut their throats. No problem at all. He'll be happy to cut their throats.
Mitchum, one of Hollywood's handsomest leading men, was drawn to the dark side. Seven years after Night of the Hunter, he created a less sanctimonious, though equally despicable psycho-villain in 1962's Cape Fear.
Feel fear. Numbing, paralyzing fear. Cape Fear.
One thing we have to remember about leading men and villains, there's one actor, or maybe there's a couple actors, but Robert Mitchum has moved effortlessly between the two.
The majority of my dad's friends were ex-felons. He liked hanging out with criminals.
Mitchum plays a low-life hoodlum who seeks revenge against the lawyer that sent him to prison. His cruelty was at first kept off-screen and in doubt as he subtly stalks and harasses the lawyer, his wife, and his daughter.
First third to half of the movie, whereas this a guy just coming to harass the guy. Did he really kill the dog? You're not really sure.
The audience doesn't learn how great a threat Katie poses until he demolishes the thugs the lawyer has sent to cripple him.
You just put the law in my hands, and I'm gonna break your heart with it.
I got a little plan for your wife and kids.
They're never gonna forget.
When he beats the crap out of like 5 hitmen, and then he takes that girl, threatens her date at the bar, and then takes the girl up to a bedroom and beats the crap out of her, now you realize, oh my God, this guy's a monster.
But when it came to creating great psycho-villains, the heavyweight champion was the master of suspense himself, Alfred Hitchcock.
Oh, good evening.
Through a series of affable, attractive evildoers, Hitchcock gave us the dark underbelly of the bright and cheerful American way of life. In Shadow of a Doubt, Uncle Charlie is a genteel, civilized man of the world who strangles his lovers to get their money. In Strangers on a Train, Bruno Anthony is as charming and as agreeable as they come, except that he wants to swap murders with a perfect stranger so that he can have his own father murdered. In 1959's North by Northwest, Martin Landau plays Leonard, whose name and manner says anything but psycho-villain.
I chose to play him slightly effete. I played him slightly gay. Hitchcock liked what I did. It was very subtle. We're talking about the 50s, and so I didn't want my choice to be blatant. I don't think James Mason liked my choice. In fact, he said that my choice affected his character. It made his character bisexual. And there was nothing he could do about it.
But it wasn't until 1960's Psycho that the psycho villain finally came into his own. Norman Bates, played by Anthony Perkins, is a mama's boy, in the absolute worst sense of the word.
The most famous psycho of all time, the star of that film, Anthony Perkins. It made his career and destroyed it.
Driven by the voice of his possessive, rigidly moralistic mother, now long dead, he dons her dress to murder the women he lusts after.
There's a part of him that's kind of pathetic. We kind of feel for him. Oh, I understand, what he's going through. But he's savage. He is a complete savage, and he does horrible things. In the ending scene, when he smiles and they superimpose the skull over his face, that pretty well says it all.
Psycho shocked and enthralled movie audiences, but few realized that it was based on the true story of Ed Gein, a Wisconsin farmer who murdered people and used their skin to make furniture and clothing.
Ed Gein, a farmer, the nicest guy in the world, who just had a hobby of taxidermy and happened to involve his mom and most of the people he knew.
Serial killers like Gein were nothing new. In Victorian London, Jack the Ripper murdered 5 prostitutes and surgically disemboweled them. In America, there was H.H. Holmes, who would lure victims into his hotel, torture and kill them, then sell their polished skeletons to medical schools. But starting in the late 60s, serial killers were appearing with mind-numbing frequency. The Zodiac Killer, Ted Bundy, and Son of Sam held whole cities in a grip of panic. In the 70s, the serial killer would take over Hollywood.
They're the extremes of humanity, and they're hunters, and there is something about them that fascinates us.
As bizarre as they are, there's a genre that I call pulp horror, the most famous example of which is Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Like Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was based on the story of Ed Gein, but there was a difference. Vietnam, the first televised war, brought bloody carnage into the American living room, while loosened production codes and high-tech special effects unleashed a whole new level of graphic possibilities.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre established a character called Leatherface, a taxidermist / butcher who wore the skin of his victims after he stuffed them, mounted them, and hung them up to dry.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a hit. 1978's Halloween and 1980's Friday the 13th were even bigger. The villains, Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees, are unstoppable killing machines, diabolically resourceful at finding new ways to dismember, crush, mangle, slash, and burn.
The all-powerful nature of this killer, and the fact that he won't stay down, and that's a kind of a terrifying thing.
Carpenter found inspiration for the character of Michael Myers during a chance encounter at a mental asylum.
I saw this little kid on one of the wards who was insane and had these eyes, this rage in his eyes. It was like feral, like a feral animal. That's something I had never seen before. And it scared me.
But the scariest of all psycho villains wasn't a mindless machine. He was a man of great learning, a professional. By 1991, the year Silence of the Lambs was released, America's trust in its experts and professionals was in a state of serious decay. As scandal followed scandal, all those in high places proved they were susceptible to the lowest kinds of human impulses. In Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter is a respected criminal psychologist the police use to help track serial killers.
How'd they catch him, Larry?
The twist is that Lecter himself is one of that loathsome breed, a monster who feasts on the entrails of his victims. He also has a taste for fine wine, appreciates classical music, and has a delightful, if biting, wit.
People will say we're in love.
Even as terrorizing as Anthony Hopkins was, for example. He still understood that those funny moments would suck you in so that you would get loose, get comfortable, so that when he came for you, you'd be like, oh, 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 oh. So you're not ready for the villainy.
You wind up being frightened of Hannibal Lecter, an Oscar-winning role for Anthony Hopkins, but you also want him to get away. It's a very, very strange feeling.
At the end of a century that saw more progress than all the previous ones combined, the last great bastion of culture and wisdom is a flesh-eating serial killer. The psycho-villain rules. But they're not the only villains who are out for blood.